Ethan boarded the late afternoon train with nothing on his mind except getting home. The station had been crowded with travelers dragging suitcases, families saying hurried goodbyes, and business people rushing to catch the last departures. After a long week of meetings and delayed flights, the quiet rhythm of a train felt like a welcome escape. He found his reserved window seat, placed his backpack on the overhead rack, and leaned back with a relieved sigh. Outside, the platform slowly came alive with the final boarding announcements as passengers searched for their coaches. Just before the doors closed, a young woman stepped inside, slightly out of breath. She wore a light gray coat over a simple blue sweater, and her long dark hair framed a face that looked both elegant and exhausted. She paused for a moment, checking her ticket before making her way down the aisle. When she stopped beside Ethan, she offered an apologetic smile. "I think this is my seat." Ethan glanced at the number and nodded. "Looks like we're traveling together." She smiled politely, settled into the seat beside him, and carefully placed a small leather bag on her lap. She thanked him softly as he moved aside to give her more room. There was something unusual about her. She wasn't scrolling through her phone like everyone else or putting on headphones. Instead, she stared out the window, as if her thoughts were somewhere far beyond the passing station. The train gave a gentle lurch before beginning its journey. Buildings slowly disappeared behind them, replaced by fields stretching toward the horizon. The steady clatter of the wheels created a peaceful rhythm that filled the coach. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Ethan opened the novel he had planned to read, but every now and then he noticed the woman rubbing her temples or quietly taking a deep breath. She looked like someone carrying the weight of 1,000 worries. Despite her efforts to remain composed, her tired eyes betrayed her. About 20 minutes into the journey, she shifted slightly in her seat. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I've barely slept in 2 days." "It's okay," Ethan replied with a reassuring smile. "You should try to get some rest." She nodded without another word. A few moments later, her eyelids closed. At first, Ethan assumed she had simply relaxed. Then, as the train gently swayed around a curve, her head slowly leaned toward him until it came to rest against his shoulder. He froze. For a second, he wondered if he should wake her. They were complete strangers. Surely she hadn't meant to do that. But she looked so peaceful. Her breathing became slow and steady, and there was a calm expression on her face that hadn't been there before. Ethan carefully adjusted his posture without disturbing her. The last thing he wanted was to embarrass her. Across the aisle, an elderly couple exchanged amused smiles. "Young love," the old man whispered to his wife. Ethan heard him and couldn't help smiling awkwardly. He wanted to explain that they had met less than an hour ago, but it seemed easier to remain silent. Time drifted by. The train rolled through small towns, crossed wide rivers, and past golden fields glowing in the evening sunlight. Vendors occasionally walked through the aisles selling coffee and snacks, but Ethan declined them all. He didn't want to move and accidentally wake the sleeping stranger resting on his shoulder. As he looked down, he noticed something sticking out of the slightly open leather bag on her lap. It was an old photograph. Only part of it was visible, but he could make out a little girl standing beside a smiling man. The edges of the picture were worn, as though it had been carried for years. He quickly looked away, feeling guilty for noticing. Whoever those people were, they clearly meant everything to her. The train continued deeper into the countryside, as daylight slowly faded into soft shades of orange and purple. Most passengers had settled into silence, some reading, others sleeping. The peaceful atmosphere made the long journey feel surprisingly short. Every so often, Ethan wondered what story had brought the mysterious young woman onto this train. Was she returning home? Leaving someone behind? running toward a new beginning or away from an old memory. He knew he would probably never find out. Or so he thought. As the announcement for the final station echoed through the carriage, the woman slowly lifted her head from his shoulder. She brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, looked directly into Ethan's eyes with a faint, knowing smile, and leaned closer. In a voice so quiet that only he could hear, she whispered, "I wasn't really sleeping." Lily's words hung in the air long after she said them. Ethan blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "You weren't asleep?" he asked quietly. She shook her head with a shy smile. "Not even for a minute." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The train continued rolling toward its destination, its wheels humming steadily against the tracks. Ethan let out a small laugh. "Then you've had me believing you were asleep this entire journey." "I know," she admitted, looking down at her hands. "I'm sorry if that was strange." "It was definitely unexpected," he replied. "But now I'm curious." She took a slow breath before answering. "When I got on the train, I was terrified." Ethan noticed the confidence in her voice fading. The smile disappeared from her face, replaced by a nervous expression that made her seem much younger than she first appeared. "I almost didn't board," she continued. "I stood on the platform for nearly 20 minutes trying to decide whether to leave." "What changed your mind?" She glanced at him. "I saw you." Ethan looked surprised. "You were reading your book," she said. "You didn't seem impatient or distracted like everyone else. You looked calm. I don't know why, but I felt safe sitting beside you." He didn't know what to say. She continued before he could respond. "When the train started moving, I realized there was no turning back. My heart was racing. I thought if I pretended to sleep, maybe I could avoid thinking about where I was going." "So you leaned on a complete stranger?" She laughed softly. "When you say it like that, it sounds crazy." "A little?" "I know." For the first time, both of them laughed together. The tension between them disappeared. "I'm Lily," she said, extending her hand. "Ethan." They shook hands, no longer strangers. After a brief silence, Ethan noticed the old photograph still resting inside her leather bag. "I hope you don't mind me asking," he said carefully, "but is that where you're headed?" She looked down at the picture and gently pulled it out. The photograph showed a little girl standing beside a smiling man outside a small house. Time had faded its colors, but the happiness in the picture remained clear. "That's me," she said softly. "And that's my father." Ethan waited quietly. "I haven't seen him in 10 years. His eyes widened. 10 years? She nodded. "My parents divorced when I was 13. My mother moved away with me, and over time, everything fell apart. Calls became arguments. Birthdays were forgotten. Pride replaced love." She traced the edge of the photograph with her thumb. "There were so many times I wanted to call him, but every year that passed made it harder." "What changed now?" She smiled sadly. 3 weeks ago, I received a letter." "A letter?" "My father wrote it himself." She reached into her bag and unfolded an envelope that looked as worn as the photograph. "He said he wasn't asking for forgiveness. He only wanted one chance to see me again before it was too late." Ethan looked at her. "Is he sick?" She slowly nodded. "The doctors say he doesn't have much time left." The words settled heavily between them. "I kept reading the letter over and over," Lily whispered. "I wanted to hate him for everything that happened. But every time I looked at this picture, I remembered the father who taught me to ride a bicycle, who stayed awake all night when I had a fever, who never missed a school play." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I don't know if I can forgive him." "You don't have to decide today," Ethan said gently. She looked at him. Sometimes, he continued, showing up is enough for one day. She wiped her eyes and smiled faintly. I've spent this entire journey imagining every possible conversation. And, in every version, something goes wrong. Ethan smiled. Real conversations almost never happen the way we imagine. She laughed quietly. I hope you're right. The announcement for the next station echoed through the carriage. Only one stop remained. Lily looked out the window as the evening lights of the town slowly appeared in the distance. You know, she said, pretending to sleep wasn't only because I was nervous. Ethan raised an eyebrow. It wasn't. She shook her head. I also wanted to find out what kind of person you were. He looked confused. You could have moved away. I could have. You could have woken me up. I thought about it. You could have complained. I guess I could have. But you didn't. She smiled warmly. You stayed completely still for hours just so someone you didn't even know could be comfortable. Ethan shrugged modestly. It didn't seem like a difficult choice. Most people wouldn't have been that patient. Their eyes met for a brief moment. The train began slowing as the final station approached. For Lily, the fear that had nearly stopped her from boarding hadn't disappeared completely. But it no longer felt impossible to face. Somehow, a conversation with a stranger had given her the courage she had been searching for all along. The train finally slowed to a stop, and the quiet hum of the engine gave way to the sounds of the busy station outside. Passengers stood, reached for their luggage, and made their way toward the doors. Ethan grabbed his backpack while Lily carefully folded the old photograph and slipped it back into her leather bag. For a brief moment, they stood facing each other in the aisle. I guess this is where we say goodbye, Ethan said with a small smile. Lily looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. I don't think thank you is enough. You don't owe me anything. I do, she replied softly. You have no idea what this journey meant to me. They stepped off the train together. The evening air was cool, and the station buzzed with people greeting loved ones after long trips. Families embraced, children laughed, and taxi drivers called out to arriving passengers. Lily looked around nervously. I told him I'd meet him outside the station. You want me to walk with you? She hesitated for only a second before nodding. I'd appreciate that. They walked side by side through the crowded terminal. Neither of them spoke much. Sometimes silence carried more comfort than words ever could. As they reached the station entrance, Lily suddenly stopped. Across the street stood an elderly man with silver hair and a wooden cane. He looked older than the man in the photograph, but his gentle eyes were exactly the same. His hands trembled slightly as he searched every face leaving the station. When his eyes met Lily's, time seemed to stop. Neither of them moved. For 10 long years, they had imagined this moment countless times. Now that it had finally arrived, neither knew how to begin. The old man slowly took a step forward. Lily? His voice shook. She felt tears filling her eyes. Dad! Before another word could be spoken, they closed the distance between them and embraced. Neither tried to hide the tears. Years of misunderstandings, silence, regret, and missed birthdays disappeared in that single hug. Ethan quietly stepped back, giving them the privacy they deserved. He watched as father and daughter smiled through their tears, talking all at once, unsure whether to laugh or cry. After a few minutes, Lily turned around. She walked back toward Ethan. I almost didn't come, she admitted. I'm glad you did. So am I. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. Can I have your number? Ethan smiled. I was hoping you'd ask. They exchanged phone numbers before she thanked him one last time. You reminded me that kindness still exists. You reminded me that it's never too late to try. She smiled before walking back toward her father. Ethan watched them leave together, disappearing into the evening crowd. Although they had been strangers only a few hours earlier, he somehow felt that their paths would cross again. Weeks passed. Life returned to its normal routine. Ethan went back to work, caught trains, attended meetings, and slowly convinced himself that the unforgettable journey had simply become another memory. Then one Saturday morning, his phone buzzed. A message appeared from an unfamiliar number. "Hi, Ethan. It's Lily." He smiled immediately. The message continued. "Dad and I have been spending every weekend together. We've talked about everything we lost over the past 10 years. We still have a lot to heal, but we're finally trying. I wanted you to know that if you hadn't been there that day, I probably would have gotten off the train before reaching my destination. Thank you for helping me find the courage I couldn't find on my own." Ethan stared at the screen for a long moment. He replied almost instantly, "I'm proud of you. You were the one who found the courage. I only happened to be sitting in the next seat." A few seconds later, another message arrived. "Maybe, but sometimes all someone needs is one kind stranger beside them." Months went by, and they stayed in touch. Sometimes they exchanged simple messages. Sometimes they shared stories about work, books, or places they wanted to visit. Eventually, Lily invited Ethan to her father's birthday dinner. When Ethan arrived, the old man welcomed him with a warm smile. "So you're the young man from the train," he said. Ethan laughed. "I guess that's me." The old man shook his hand firmly. "I'll never be able to thank you enough." "You don't have to," Ethan replied. "Seeing the two of you together is more than enough." That evening was filled with laughter, old photographs, and stories that had waited years to be told. As Ethan looked around the table, he realized something remarkable. He had boarded the train expecting nothing more than a quiet ride home. Instead, a simple act of kindness had reunited a broken family and brought two strangers into each other's lives in a way neither could have imagined. Sometimes, the most life-changing journeys don't begin with grand adventures. Sometimes, they begin with a stranger resting their head on your shoulder, and one unexpected whisper that changes everything forever.